Well, welcome to part 9, which is communist liberations. Let me say one thing, and then Peter is going to make a comment on this. The 20th century is full of new Chinas. We have the new China of the Republic of China. We have the new China of the Kuomintang in 1927, new anthem, new flag, a second republic, as it were. And the third republic, that of the People's Republic of China, is established in 1949, a year that the regime officially designates as the year of liberation.
But you've called this liberations plural.
Right.
And what I want to know is why you call this liberations plural. I've always thought of it this in terms of 1949 is called the Jiafang, the year of liberation.
Right. And of course, liberation is in the eye of the beholder.
Right.
Some people are liberated from oppressive situations, liberated from what in the regime's eye are feudal conditions. Other people are liberated from their property. Some would be soon liberated from their lives.
Yes.
I put it this way, and I thought about putting it in quotes, but I thought I would let learners decide for yourselves what constitutes liberation. What is success and failure in the different efforts of the Chinese Communist Party after seizing power in 1949? Because no regime really, perhaps since the Tang Dynasty, has been as ambitious in its organization of society, in shaping every aspect of social life, of economic life, of cultural life. We talked before about militarization. We have the militarization of the state under Yuan Shikai, the militarization of the nation more broadly speaking under Chiang Kai-shek, and then militarization of the soul, ideally under Mao Zedong, in which people would internally be militarized
yes,
to
this
follow.
sort of turning communism on its head so that now you begin with the spirit rather than the means of production to transform society. I think there are ways in which Wang Anshi's plans in the 11th century involve a great deal of transformation through an expansion of government initiative, but I don't think they ever tried to control the market or tried to control things to the degree that, in fact, the Tang had this perfectly unified ideal of how culture, politics, economy, power would all be in a unified hierarchy. But so back to this notion of liberation. People are being liberated in various ways, but it does strike me that there's a kind of ambition to the party's desire to transform society that in many ways must have had a great deal of social support, that there was a sense that people were tenants, many people were tenants and poor and oppressed and couldn't find a way out. People had been starving and suffering. There was famines in the 1920s. Warfare was destructive. Prostitution and drug addiction were very serious issues in the cities. And they did wipe them out.
Prostitution and drug addiction, absolutely, for a time, wiped them out. And an enormous, it's difficult to overstate the extraordinary realm of reform and revolution in this period. So farmers are given land as landlords. Even the smallest, poorest landlord lose theirs and often lose their lives. So-called counter-revolutionaries are executed in large numbers, in numbers in the millions in the first years. But other people do prosper, and at least in the short term, farmers are given their land. Then it's all collectivized in Soviet style, but in a way that's even more ambitious than the Stalinist collectivization of the late 1920s and early 1930s of the first 5-year plan of the Soviet Union. Industrialization proceeds on a pace unimagined even by Sun Yat-sen and Chiang Kai-shek, in part by the extraordinary support of the Soviet Union and of the Soviet model. The entire country is geared toward this Sino-Soviet cooperation, agriculture for export now, to bring in the makings of a new industrial society. You have universities reformed to serve the state and to serve the party and to serve national purposes, not simply the purposes of learning for learning's sake. A whole range in every realm that one can imagine. Literature and art.
So could I ask you a question about this? Because to what extent do you think the party thought in the early 50s that they actually had a consensus among the people or among elites about what they were doing?
I don't believe they thought they had a consensus among elites. They barely, in some sense, had a consensus among themselves. There was a major debate in the party about whether or not to maintain a mixed economy for a large number of years before proceeding to socialism, or to leap into it very fast. For the first 3 years, they really maintained the idea of a mixed economy. Yet by the end of 1956, every form of private property is gone. And that really reflects Mao Zedong's ambition and his growing dominance over his followers, but his extraordinary ambition for rapid and what he hoped would be permanent change. We cannot know what your average city dweller or your average farmer felt in this, because we have no means of knowing. There are no elections, there are no public opinion polls, and so on. We know there is some fear of resistance, hence the repression of the early 50s. And at the same time, some of these policies have to be quite popular among those who benefit by them in this period of time. There's a belief in the part of the party in 1956 that it is the old elite that they need to engage above all to deal with the big issues of modernization. So the inherited intellectuals and engineers from the nationalist period, and invigorating them for socialist construction is really at the heart of what the so-called 100 Flowers movement is all about.
And that did not end well.
That did not end well.
You know, I think we should,
as we will see.
We should stop here, because what you're going to hear in part 9, Communist Liberations, is in fact this story of the founding of the People's Republic through the end of the Maoist era and the death of Chairman Mao. And it's going to be an extraordinary story, one of the greatest stories, really, of 20th century political history.
And indeed of all of Chinese history, arguably.
Arguably.
Arguably, we'll argue.
Well, we'll see you again at the end of this section.